Hello, writers. My name is Tennyson E. Stead. I am a working screenwriter, a working script doctor, and welcome to The Right Stuff. So in our last class, we worked our way through the actions of Act 1, and our protagonist carried our story through to the beginning of Act 2 and the next big thing that they need to do to achieve their larger goal for the episode. If our theory about the 3-act structure and how it's a natural consequence of active writing holds up, then this next thing that your protagonist needs to achieve is probably the thing that puts them in direct contact with the stakes and the consequences of whatever it is that they're trying to do in Act 1. Whatever they did before was probably the lowest stakes effort that they needed to undertake. It was probably more about preparation. It was probably more about getting their ducks in order. That preparation is now complete. They're pushing through into an action that's going to challenge them in much more visceral ways. They're going to lean on the preparation that they have already undertaken. And this effort that they're making now is, in all likelihood, going to carry them up to the point where the unsustainability of the goal that they've taken on, the scope of whatever it is they're trying to achieve in this episode, is probably going to reveal itself to them at the end of this act. So, probably the biggest mistake that writers make as the stakes of the episode begin to escalate in this way is by trying to escalate those stakes artificially. Okay, this is definitely the part where a lot of writers will start throwing extra plot at the protagonist, and I advise you not to do that. Your character has committed to doing something far beyond the scope of their means. And this episode is their first serious effort to achieve that goal, which means this is their first opportunity to come face to face with just how far outside of their depth they actually are. This is the moment when that starts to become apparent to the audience. So you want it to be the efforts of the protagonist to achieve their goal that pushes them over that ledge. You want them to be creating the conflict for themselves instead of having the conflict backed up to their doorstep. You know, if they're a detective and they're looking for clues, don't throw a clue. Don't have someone dial the hotline. Let them go pour over all the data that they can possibly put their hands on until eventually they find something worth investigating. And if that thing that they're investigating turns out to be unrelated, or if it turns out to be misleading, then that's the breaks. You have a plot twist because now the protagonist is investigating the wrong thing and they don't know that, and they're going to find out as time goes on. Let them do the work and let them make their own mistakes. Let them push themselves and their efforts forward until they start to become a problem for other people. And that's where the conflict that starts showing itself in Act 2 is going to come from. Okay? So that's one concept to keep in mind here. So, building off of Act 1, your character has whatever resources they've managed to provide themselves with over the course of the story so far. What are the things that they need to do? What are the things that they need to achieve in order to secure their goal for Act 2? What do they need to do in order to make the work that they're going to be doing in Act 3 the next logical step in their efforts to achieve their goal for the first episode? Make a list of all of those things and then sit down and write the scenes where they do that stuff. Again, I remind you that every scene is about an effort to achieve an overwhelmingly challenging goal. In Act 1, there's a pretty good chance your character went out and found some of the people that they need to find in order to pursue their goal farther. They've started, through their efforts to achieve their goal, assembling the series cast of the show. Right? So getting these people to help them, if that's the case, is no longer the challenge that they're facing in any given scene. But any given relationship is defined by the efforts of the characters in that relationship to pull that relationship in different directions. Conflict, essentially, is what happens when characters are trying to use the same resources for different purposes, right? Well, a relationship is a resource. So if your protagonist has gone and gotten someone else to help them in their mission, then they've made certain compromises and they've made agreements, and that other character has joined the protagonist's efforts for their own reasons towards their own end. That other character is trying to achieve something that's different, at least in subtle ways, from what the protagonist is trying to achieve. So anytime those two characters go to work on a problem together, anytime that they are sharing the same space, you have one character trying to do one thing and another character trying to do another thing. Now, those efforts are not going to be repetitive necessarily. They might be, depending on the relationship. But in all likelihood, those characters are going to understand very quickly that there are more effective ways and less effective ways to get what they want from the other character in question. So their efforts to move the scene and therefore the show in their own direction towards their own goal are going to evolve over time based on who they are and how they do things and what's effective for them and so on and so forth. But what you don't want are scenes where your protagonist is sitting down with another character just to collect information for the sake of the audience. You don't want that. You want the protagonist to sit down and try and get something from this other character while the other character is trying to do something different. And you want the stakes of those two efforts to be real. You want both of those characters to be motivated enough that they're not willing to just stop what they're doing and push for the other character's objective unless some kind of compromise is made that allows both characters to get what they need. And if you ground these characters in their goals and in their efforts to achieve their goals, then the show's always going to be interesting because each character is always trying to pull the show in their own direction. And you're never going to lack conflict. Anytime your protagonist goes and finds someone else in the show because they need something, that person's going to have something of their own to do, and you've already got a scene. You've already got the mechanics for a scene. Now you just play it out. As long as both characters are willing to commit to their efforts. So, that's all stuff to keep in mind. Make a list of all the things that your protagonist needs to do to achieve their goal and drive their efforts into Act 3. And then write the scenes where they do those things. Once you finish that, you're going to be halfway through your pilot script. Congratulations. Next week, we're going to work our way through Act 3 of your pilot. Thank you very much for showing up for the right stuff. I'll see you next week, and I look forward to learning with you.